guys, it's Cece, and today I am here to do a monthly recommendations video. In case you don't already know, Monthly Recommendations is a Goodreads group that was created by two lovely people here on BookTube, Kay Lorraine from the channel Kay Lorraine and Trina from the channel Between Chapters, and I will leave the links to both of their channels as well as to the Monthly Recommendations Goodreads group down in the description below, so you can go and check all of that out. But this month's monthly recommendations theme is Ownvoices, so today I will be exclusively talking about Ownvoices books. And before we really get into the recommendations, let me talk a little bit more about what Ownvoices means. So, Ownvoices. It was originally created as a hashtag back in September of 2015 by author Corinne Doivas. And the easiest way to sum up Ownvoices is that it means that the book has a protagonist that shares a marginalized identity with the author of that book. And this marginalized identity doesn't really have a limit. It can refer to queer characters, it can refer to characters of color, to characters with mental illness or disabilities. Corinne Doivas actually has an entire FAQ on her website that's all about Ownvoices, her own opinions on it, all that stuff that I was reading up on before I did this video, and I'm going to leave that down below as well. I'm going to have so much in the description, guys. Please read it. I promise I'm doing tons of work, so you have stuff to look at. But I will leave that in the description so you can learn more about Ownvoices from her perspective and what she thinks about the hashtag and everything surrounding it. I do want to say that I focus a lot on reading Ownvoices books, especially when it comes to Ownvoices queer books. However, I also want to say that this is a thing that I don't do as well when it comes to other forms of marginalized identities, and I am really constantly trying to do better. It's something that I think all of us as readers should constantly be trying to get better at. However, before we get into the recommendations portion of this video, I do want to say that this list does not reflect any Ownvoices characters that have a mental illness or a disability, which I know is something that is a lacking on my part. However, if you have recommendations for books that are Ownvoices portrayals of either of these things, or in general, if you think that there is an Ownvoices book that I would love that I haven't read, please leave those in the comments below as well, and that comment section can become a resource for all of those who are watching this video. Besides that resource, I will also be leaving other resources in the description that you can check out. This can be recommendations lists, further people talking about why Ownvoices is important to them. Plus, make sure to go check out the Goodreads group because everyone who is a part of monthly recommendations this month will be posting a link to their blog post or YouTube video or whatever where they talk about their own Ownvoices recommendations, so there will be tons of recommendations in that Goodreads group for March. And the last thing I want to say before we get started is that I'm going to be going through these fairly quickly because I wanted to recommend as many books to you as I possibly could. But don't worry, every single book, again, will be listed in the description and they'll be in order, so you can go through there. You can read all of the names that I've said, you can look into them more. Plus, I will be leaving purchase links for a number of the books. As it happens in the publishing industry, it can be much easier for cis, heterosexual, white, able-bodied, neurotypical people to be published than it is for some of these Ownvoices authors, so a lot of them come from sources where they can only be purchased online. If that is the case for any of the books that I'm mentioning, and it will be, then I will leave the purchase links for those books down in the description as well so you can have easy access. Plus, it is a great way to support Ownvoices work and to further tell authors and publishers and editors that we care about Ownvoices books. So I think that that's everything. So I'm sorry this introduction was long. I just wanted to have a whole thing where I could talk about what Ownvoices was and give you lots of places where you can go and learn more. I just think that that's something that is important to me when I'm talking about books like this. And for the purposes of this video, I have decided to split my recommendations in terms of genre. So we are going to start with a couple of graphic novel recommendations, then we are going to go to contemporary or real world setting books, and then I will finish off with sci-fi fantasy. So that is how everything is being split up. That is everything you need to know. Like I said, tons in the description. Leave comments for recommendations. Let's get started. I have so many books to cover. Okay, so starting off with graphic novels, the first book that I have here is American Born Chinese by Jean Luen Yang. This graphic novel follows three different characters. One is a boy named Jin, who is the only Chinese American student at his new school. One is the fable of the Monkey King, who wants to be the most powerful being in the world. And one is about a boy named Danny, who is very embarrassed when his cousin Chin Ki comes to visit because Chin Ki is a very harmful, stereotyped American media representation of someone who's Chinese. All three of these stories are interwoven and all just talk about identity, what it means to be Chinese, what it means to be Chinese American. Beautiful artwork, and Gene Luen Yang is one of my absolute favorite graphic novel authors. I think that he creates beautiful, beautiful work, and so I highly recommend this one. Next up, what would this channel be if I didn't talk about Lumberjanes? Lumberjanes is a comic series originally created by Shannon Waters, Brooke Ellis, Grace A. Allen, and Noelle Stevenson. This comic series follows girls who attend a summer camp for hardcore lady types. They think it's just going to be a regular summer camp, and then they spend a lot of the time fighting mythical monsters. There are multiple queer characters throughout the series, and in particular, two of the main girls are in a relationship, and multiple of the creators of this comic series are queer as well. It's such a happy and positive comic series, and like I said, what would my channel be if I didn't recommend Lumberjanes? So now getting into contemporary and real-world setting books. First up, we have The Miseducation of Cameron Post by Emily M. Danforth. This takes place in the 1990s about a girl named Cameron Post. Within the first couple of pages of the book, she finds out that her parents have died, and she is really upset with herself because her first thought is that she's relieved they'll never have to know she was kissing a girl. This can be a difficult book to read because there is a good portion of it set at a conversion camp, but it's one of my favorites. I think it's beautiful. And if we want to take a step away from the angst, then I want to recommend Style by Chelsea M. Cameron. This book follows two girls, Stella and Kyle. Stella knows that she is gay, but she isn't out. Kyle has no idea, and then they are paired up to work together on a project and slowly fall in love. It's fluffy, it's sweet, it's adorable, and I love it. Another great story with the female-female romance is Everything Leads to You by Nina LaCour. This book follows Emmy, and she works in Hollywood on movie sets, and then she discovers that there is this Clint Eastwood-esque actor who died, and it turns out he had a daughter. The story becomes the mystery of locating that daughter and of learning more about her, and it's also a love story between Emmy and this girl. It's beautifully written, and if I could ask for one movie based on a book, it would definitely be this one. And if you're interested in other books by Nina LaCour, she has written other books with queer lady main characters, including We Are Okay. We Are Okay centers on Marin processing grief. She has lost someone very close to her, and it's just a really contained novel about dealing with emotion. It's between her and her best friend Mabel, who were for a short period of time involved in a relationship. While I don't love it quite as much as Everything Leads to You, this is another great Nina LaCour book that has a queer lady main character. Also Radical by E.M. Koki. This follows a girl named Bex, and she is part of a survivalist movement. Basically, she thinks that at some point the world is going to end or it's going to fall into disarray, and it's going to be up to her to protect herself and her family. But also it's about Bex being a butch lesbian, what that means for her in general, what that means as a part of the survivalist movement, and it's unlike any other YA that I've ever read. It is wonderful and so original. Next up is The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. This book is told through a series of vignettes, and it follows a young Latinx girl in Chicago named Esperanza. It's very much a coming-of-age story, and it is absolutely beautifully written. It has well-deserved hype, and I seriously recommend that you pick it up. There are so many coming-of-age stories in this stack, but it just is the kind of thing that apparently I read a whole lot of. So along those lines, I have to recommend Nervous Conditions by Tsitsi Dangaranga. This book follows a girl named Tambu in Zimbabwe, and it is all about her coming into her own and trying to gain an education. There's a lot in here about colonialism, about growth, about loving both your culture and trying to push away from that a little bit. It is just really well done. This is the first book in a series. I haven't read the second one, but honestly, this book stands really, really well on its own, and Tambu is a great main character. We also have Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Elire Sanz. This is a beautifully written story about Audrey and Dante meeting, forming a friendship, and eventually falling in love, and it's about that, but it's also about the fact that both of them are Mexican-American and how they process these different aspects of their identity, what that means for them, and it's just the way relationships are written in this book is so well done. And yes, you heard that right. This is about two Latinx boys falling in love, okay? Do you get it? That's what this is about. Also, we have Funny Boy by Seanan McGuire. This book is set in the late 70s into the early 80s, and it is about a boy named Audrey in Sri Lanka. It is told in 6 parts, and it is about him growing up and realizing he's gay, but it is also all set within this time of a growing ethnic conflict within Sri Lanka. This is largely autobiographical. Seanan McGuire did grow up in Sri Lanka, he's gay, and he has since emigrated to Canada, and it's just, that shows it's a beautifully written book about Audrey realizing he's gay, but also the larger rising tensions that are going on around him. Next, we have Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. This is a classic. It was written in the 1930s and sort of largely forgotten at the time until Alice Walker kind of rediscovered it, made sure that everyone knew about it, and wow, glad that we do. This book follows a black woman named Janie starting at 16 and continuing on through her life. She has these 2 marriages that really don't work for her until she meets the man that she really loves. This book has such lyrical and poetic writing that really just pulls you in. I originally read it in high school and it's stuck with me since then. I refuse to get rid of my copy. I just think that it's a beautifully told story, so I recommend it. And while we are talking about her, why not mention a book by Alice Walker and recommend The Color Purple. It's about Celie growing up in the early 1900s. She is a black lesbian, and it's about the mistreatments that she receives when she's younger and how it really pushes her down and forces her to kind of live within herself. But then it's also how she finds that identity again through the help and the love of all of the black women around her that become a very familial sisterhood for her. It's about close relationships between women, but it's also about Celie finding her voice again. Celie and Shug are a couple that I adore, and Celie is in my top 5 of favorite female characters of all time. I love her so deeply. So, Alice Walker. And last up in contemporary and real-world recommendations, I have If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo. This book is about a trans girl named Amanda, and because of something really traumatic that happened at her previous school, she has moved to a new school. Once there, she meets a lot of new people, one of which is a boy named Grant, and she is slowly falling for him, but also living with a lot of fear because she doesn't want to deal with coming out after what she's endured at her previous school. This is an absolutely fabulous book. Besides being Ownvoices about a trans main character, this is also a trans girl on the cover, and the audiobook is also narrated by a trans woman, so there was just a lot done right on this book, and I think it's a really valuable piece of YA. And now on to fantasy and sci-fi. So first we have Ash by Melinda Lowe, and basically this is a queer female retelling of Cinderella. It has a very fairy tale vibe, like if you were sitting around a campfire and you asked someone to tell a story, this is the kind of story that I think they would tell. It's got all the magic of a retelling, and then there's also a great, super wonderful romance between 2 ladies, and it's great. It's great. Also, of course, one of my all-time favorites, Of Fire and Stars by Audrey Coulthurst. This book is about a girl named Denna. She is the princess of a foreign kingdom, and she is betrothed to a prince. But then, when she travels to the kingdom where the prince resides and meets him, she finds herself falling for his horse-riding sister instead. There's no homophobia in this world, which is excellent, and I appreciate it, and it's just a story that I needed when I was younger, that I think I really, really would have benefited from when I was younger, so I have to have this chance to shout it out and to just be so excited because Audrey Coulthurst is writing future queer ladies in fantasy, and that's basically all I want. We also have Axiom, The Last Hope by R.M. Piercy. This is a dystopian book following our main character, Ella. She's entering her last year of schooling, which is a time when this world, the world of Axiom, begins to decide their futures for them. Their future jobs will be picked for them, their future significant others will be picked for them, but Ella finds herself falling for her very female dorm mate, Carly. I'm so happy that this exists because I really want there to be more queer dystopian in the world. It just makes sense when you're talking about dystopian books that there would be queer people, but it seems weirdly difficult to get that. And the romance between Ella and Carly in this book is easily the best part. As a person who fell in love with her roommate, it was just, I identified, and it was fabulous. Also have to shout out Not Your Sidekick by C.B. Lee. Not Your Sidekick follows a girl named Jess, and she is the child of two superpowered parents. Sadly, it seems like she has not inherited any of these super abilities, so she goes and gets an internship to still be useful to the family, only to find out that this internship is for the town's supervillains. She also winds up working alongside her crush, Abby. Jess is bisexual and biracial. Her parents are Chinese and Vietnamese. This is one of the happiest and sweetest books. I think it's fabulous. I also want to recommend Shadow Shaper by Danielle Jose Older. This book follows a girl named Sierra Santiago. She lives in Brooklyn and she discovers something called shadow shaping. Basically, shadow shaping is a type of magic that infuses ancestral spirits into music and art and stories. And she finds out that maybe her family has something to do with shadow shaping. This is a fabulous urban fantasy with an almost entirely Latinx cast. It's just the great first book in an urban fantasy series that I think is definitely one that should be on your TBR. Next up, The Rules of Ever After by Killian B. Brewer. This is just like a super cute fairy tale it verges almost on middle grade. It's about this guy named Prince Philip, and basically he's been told that the person he has to marry is a person who sleeps on top of a huge stack of mattresses with one pea underneath and they can't sleep. And then the person who actually manages to pull this off is another prince named Prince Daniel. And everyone's like, but two princes can't get married, and Prince Philip is like, well, you made the rules. It's really cute and fun and fairy tale, and there are two queer princesses that they encounter along their journey. It's just an adorable book, really. That's the main point. Also, We Are the Ants by Sean David Hutchinson. This is about a boy named Henry. Henry has been going through an incredibly difficult time. His boyfriend killed himself the previous year. His older brother has dropped out of college and has a pregnant girlfriend. And on top of that all, he has been abducted by aliens a few times. And basically, these aliens have told him that the world is going to end and Henry has the ability to stop it, but he doesn't really see a reason why the world needs to keep on turning. And then along this journey, he meets a boy named Diego Vega, and they start to fall in love. Sean David Hutchinson knocks it out of the park. He has lots of other books as well that feature queer main characters, which I have not read yet, but I will, I'm sure. But especially he just had one come out called On the Edge of the Universe. That was just a recent release, as well as the 5 Stages of Andrew Brawley. That is about a gay main character. Along those lines, I also recommend More Than This by Patrick Ness. It opens and our main character has died. Basically. That's how the book opens. The book starts and the main character dies and the story goes on from there. It's got that great mix of it being fantastical with a lot of these real world elements, and I had a really hard time at times reading More Than This because I identified so strongly with so much of the main character. Patrick Ness also has another book that is going to be released in the next couple of months about a gay main character named Release, so you can go and check that out as well if you're interested. Coming in on the home stretch, I want to recommend Dreadnought by April Daniels. This is yet another queer superhero story, because I love them. This is a book about Danny, and she's trans, but she's not out, and then the superhero Dreadnought dies at her feet. When Dreadnought dies, Danny inherits all of his powers, and along with that, she inherits the body that she's always wanted. And so this story becomes a superhero story, both about fighting evil in, like, you know, the actualized supervillain sense, and fighting the evil that is in her own home in a lot of ways. It's just fabulous, and I loved it. Plus, Danny's a lesbian, and I'm so excited for book 2, which is coming out in a few months. And the last book that I have to recommend is Peter Darling by Austin Chant. This is a retelling / semi-sequel to Peter Pan. In this story, Peter Pan is trans and has grown up as Wendy Darling. Like, after the events of Peter Pan, it's like he returned back to London to try to live as Wendy Darling, but 10 years have passed and he's returned to Neverland as Peter Pan. Because in the time that this was set in London, he was not really being accepted as being trans. Once back in Neverland, he's now a grown man. He's trying to get back in with the Lost Boys, but along the way, he starts to fall for Captain Hook, who also is falling for him. So this is a trans retelling slash sequel to Peter Pan with a male-male romance between Pan and Hook. It's magical. It adds so much to the world of Peter Pan, and I think that Pan is a fabulous character. I haven't read Austen Chan's other work, but I know specifically that he has one called Coffee Boy, which is also about a trans character with a male-male romance. So yes, recommend that as well. Okay guys, there you go. Those are all of my Own Voices reviews. I really hope I'm able to edit this down because this is an obscenely long video. If you have recommendations for me for Own Voices books, please leave them in the comments below. Check out all of the resources that I've left. Be sure to go to the monthly recommendations group and check out the other Own Voices recommendations. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!